The first time Maribel saw the boy, he was curled against the outer post of her south gate with his knees tucked to his chest and a feed sack pulled over his shoulders against the night wind. Dawn had not yet broken clean over the high Wyoming grass, and the cold had a mean edge to it, the kind that crept through wool and settled in a body's old hurts. Her mare stopped of her own accord. Mara sat still in the saddle, one gloved hand on the reins, the other on the rifle laid across her lap, and watched the child breathe steam into the dark. He could not have been more than 10, maybe 11 if hunger had not gnawed him small. He was barefoot. That was what made her slide from the saddle without a sound. Not the narrow shoulders, not the filthy collar. The feet, blue-white in the half-light, tucked under him like he thought he could hide them from the weather if he made himself compact enough. Mara nudged his bootless heel with the barrel of the rifle. His eyes flew open so fast it was like watching a trapped animal come awake. He rolled, came half to his feet, then froze when he saw the gun. "I ain't stealing," he said at once. His voice shook, but he made himself hold her gaze. Mara looked at the gate, then at the stretch of empty road, then at him again. "You'd be poor at it, sleeping in plain sight." The boy swallowed. A bruise yellowed one cheekbone. Another hid darker under the dirt at his jaw. She lowered the rifle. "How many nights?" He said nothing. That silence told her more than an answer would have. "Before we go further, settle in wherever you are tonight and let us know in the comments where you're listening from. It's a comfort to know who is riding along." Mara looped the reins over the gatepost and crouched in front of the boy. Up close she could smell cold dust, old sweat, and the faint iron tang of dried blood. The sack around his shoulders had once carried flour from Cheyenne. His hands were chapped raw. He watched her face the way folks watched a snake in tall grass, ready for the first strike. "You got a name?" she asked. He glanced toward the road, not the house. "Eli." "Eli what?" A beat passed. "Just Eli." Nobody was just anything, not in country like this. Mara stood. Her left knee gave a little pull when she straightened, old trouble from the winter her husband had died. She ignored it. "You hungry?" That made him angry. Strange thing, anger arriving quicker than hope. His mouth hardened, and for one flicker of a second she saw pride standing up in him like a fence post. "I didn't come begging." "No," she said. "You came freezing." Different matter. The sun edged pale over the ridge, and with it came the first sound from the ranch proper, the far clang of the pump handle, then a cough from the bunkhouse. Morning had found them. If one of the hands rode this way and saw a stray boy at her gate, there would be talk before breakfast. Mara weighed that and did not care for it. She had spent 3 years not caring for talk. "Come on," she said. He did not move. "I said come on. House is warm." "Why?" The word came sharp, suspicious. Too sharp for a child, unless life had taught him every kindness was a bargain laid face down. Mara took up the reins. "Because if I leave you here, you'll lose those feet before supper. Because a person sleeping outside my gate every night makes him my business whether I asked for it or not. And because I have coffee on the stove fit to raise the dead, and I'd rather waste some on you than on the Almighty." That almost pulled something like confusion across his face. "I'll work for food," Eli said. "You can barely stand. Still can work." Mara studied him one last moment, then opened the gate. "All right. You can earn breakfast by not falling down before we reach the porch." He followed her, but at a distance, always just outside arm's reach. She noticed he kept to the side opposite the house windows. A child who feared being seen, or recognized. At the porch steps, Old Hound lifted his grizzled head from the mat and gave one suspicious woof. Eli flinched so hard he nearly slipped off the bottom board. Mara clicked her tongue. "Hound, hush. He only looks half wild." Inside, the kitchen smelled of chicory coffee and banked wood smoke. Her husband's mug still hung where he had left it the week fever took him in '89. She had never moved it. Eli stopped just over the threshold, shivering now that warmth had found him permission to feel it. "Door," Mara said. He shut it and kept standing. "Sit." He sat on the edge of a chair, as if ready to run with it tied to his back. Mara poured coffee into her own mug and hot water into another, then thinned it with milk and 2 spoons of molasses. From the oven box, she pulled yesterday's biscuits and laid them near the stove to soften. Eli's eyes tracked every movement. Not greedy. Counting. Measuring what was safe to want. A knock sounded once on the back frame. Then the door opened before she answered. Jasper Wynn stepped in with the morning ledger tucked under one arm and frost in his beard. He had been her foreman since before she'd buried Caleb. His gaze went to the boy and stayed there. Eli stood so fast the chair legs scraped. Jasper shut the door behind him. Didn't mean to startle anybody. The line of his voice was gentle, but the boy had already backed toward the hearth, shoulders set for trouble. Mara placed the mug in front of Eli. He's cold. He's eating. After that, we'll see. Jasper took in the sack, the bare feet, the bruise, the way the child kept one eye on the nearest exit. He gave a small nod and set the ledger down. Town's awake early. Deputy Pike rode out before dawn asking if we'd seen a boy. Said there was thieving at Cutter's Mercantile last evening. Bread, smoked ham, matches. Eli did not touch the mug. Mara felt the room tighten. And Pike didn't say much else. Only that Barlow Cutter was sore enough to spit nails and swore he'd skin the culprit when found. Jasper's eyes rested on the boy's face. Not accusing. Not blind, either. Thought I'd best mention it. The kettle ticked softly on the stove. Hound sighed by the door. Eli stared at the steam rising from the watered coffee like he could disappear into it. Mara knew Barlow Cutter well enough. Storekeeper in town. Bank lender when it suited him. Friend to Sheriff Vance. Holder of more paper on other people's land than any man in the county ought to have. If he wanted a child hunted for stolen bread, the county would mount up and call it order. Did Pike say the boy was alone? She asked. Jasper shook his head. Said only small. Frightened. Quick. At that, Eli's fingers curled tight against the chair back. One knuckle split, and fresh blood welled red. Mara looked from the blood to the bruise, and then to the boy's face. Something had changed the moment Jasper spoke Cutter's name. Fear, yes. But beneath it, something hotter. Something close to hate. Mara set the biscuit plate in front of him and pulled out the chair opposite. Eat before pride kills you outright. He obeyed then, but careful, one small bite at a time, as if food might be snatched back for presuming on it. Jasper stood near the stove with his hat in both hands. Pike will ride back, he said. Likely, Mara answered. And if the boy is the one? She met his eyes. Jasper Wynne had pulled her through 2 bad winters, 1 locust year, and the burial of a husband. He was not a man who asked foolish questions. Then I reckon we'll find out why before we hand him to anybody eager to do the finding with a strap. Jasper's mouth moved like he had expected no less. Want me to keep the hands off the south pasture till noon? Do that. When he had gone, Eli finished half a biscuit and reached for the second without thinking. Realizing it, he stopped, ashamed of his own hunger. Mara pushed the plate closer. Nobody keeps tally on biscuits in this house. His lashes flicked up. Some do. Then they're poorer company than I am. He ate the second biscuit. Then the third. By the time the light had climbed full into the kitchen, Mara had drawn a wash basin close to the stove and filled it with hot water. Eli saw it and went rigid. No, the word came flat and fast. Your feet are near black with cold. Sit. I said no. She leaned against the table, not crowding him. You think I'm aiming to drown you in a dishpan? Don't like folks grabbing at me. There it was. Not childish temper. Law. A rule laid down by Payne. Mara pulled her own chair back and Saturday, fair enough. Then do it yourself. Water's there. Towel too. He hesitated a long time before peeling 1 foot from under the chair rung and lowering it into the basin. The hiss of his breath made her jaw clench. The skin was split at both heels. 1 toe was swollen double from where it had likely frozen and thawed and frozen again. On his right ankle, half hidden by grime, ran a welt shaped too straight to be accident. Mara kept her face empty. Matches and bread won't earn a beating like that. Eli dried his foot with fierce concentration. Didn't steal the ham. She waited. He watched the steam. Just the bread. And the matches. Ham was already in the sack. Whose sack? No answer. Mara rose, crossed to the pie safe, and took down the salve tin she used on split udders, rope burns, and men's foolishness. When she set it beside the basin, Eli looked at it like it might bite. For the cracks, she said. He surprised her then. He blurted it all at once, like a horse clearing a creek in one terrified jump. Mama kept Cutter's books. In the upstairs office behind the store. She'd copy accounts at night and hide bread in her apron if I hadn't eaten. Yesterday, he found a paper gone missing and said she'd taken it. She said she hadn't. He hit her. I bit him. Then Pike came. Mama shoved me through the back and told me run to the Bell Ranch and not stop for anything. Said you'd know what was right if I could just get here. Mara did not move. Did you get the paper? she asked. Eli shook his head hard. Mama did. I think. She stuffed something in my coat when she pushed me out. I didn't look. Slowly, very slowly, he put a hand inside the torn lining at his side seam and drew out a flat brass key and a folded sheet wrapped in oilcloth. The sight of that paper sent a little current up Mara's spine. He had carried it next to his ribs all night in the cold and never once mentioned it. You can read? He asked. Enough to keep from being skinned. She unwrapped the oilcloth. The paper inside was an account note bearing her dead husband's name. Caleb Bell. $1,200 due, secured against cattle, horseflesh, eastern pasture, and all standing improvements. Her stomach went hard. Barlow Cutter had produced a version of this note 2 years after Caleb died and tried to collect the balance against the ranch. Mara had fought it down piece by piece, proving payments made in calves, hides, and winter wheat. Cutter had cursed, smiled, and said maybe his clerk had copied the figures wrong. He had never shown her the original. This was the original, and Caleb's signature at the bottom was false. Not badly false to a stranger. But Mara had watched her husband sign salt orders, church ledgers, and one awkward love note left on her saddle 20 years earlier when courting made him shy. Caleb crossed his B like a man cinching a strap. This signature curved smooth and pretty, pinned by someone who loved the look of a name more than the truth of the hand behind it. Attached to it with rusted pinholes was another sheet, a list of names, amounts, pasture claims, and dates. Widow Keene, Olson Place, Marbury Well Rights. Every one of them people Barlow Cutter had leaned on, bought out, or buried in paper over the last 5 years. Jasper came back through the door as Mara was reading the bottom line. He saw her face and set his hat down. Bad. She handed him the paper. Jasper read slower than she did, his finger moving near each line. When he reached the signature, his brows drew together. Caleb never wrote like that. No. Eli watched them from the chair, every inch of him braced for blame. Mama said if Mr. Cutter lost that paper he'd blame me either way. Mara folded the note with care. Her dead husband's name lay warm from her hand. Rage came over her not fast, but deep. Deep as a river cut under rock. Barlow Cutter had not only tried to take her ranch. He had done it wearing Caleb's stolen name. Jasper broke the silence. Pike's likely not hunting a thief. He's hunting that paper. I know it. Then keeping the boy means making ourselves plain enemies. Mara looked at Eli. At the split feet. The bruise. The way he tried not to cower when adults used his future as talk between them. She thought of Ruth, the little daughter she had lowered into frozen ground at 5 years old, lungs drowned by scarlet fever after the town doctor wasted half a day riding to a banker's sick son first. She thought of how small Ruth's shoes had been when she cleaned and wrapped them away. She had buried husband and child, and nearly the ranch after. Folks said that much sorrow made a woman hard. It had not made her hard. It had made her exact. No, she said. It means Cutter made himself mine a long while back, and only now was foolish enough to hand me the proof. By noon Deputy Pike came, just as Jasper had said. Mara met him on the porch with her hands in her apron pockets. Morning, Mrs. Bell. You've had one already. State your purpose. He cleared his throat. Sheriff Vance asked me to look in on that missing boy. We had report he might have come this direction. And if he had, Pike shifted his weight. His gaze slid once toward the kitchen window. Then I need to bring him back. For bread. For theft. A hungry child stealing bread is theft now. Mrs. Bell, please don't make me argue law on your porch. Then don't come quoting law when what you mean is Barlow Cutter is impatient. That stung him. He colored. Cutter says the boy also took papers from his office. Important papers. Mara kept her face blank. A barefoot child climbed an office, sorted through legal accounts, and made off into the night with documents he cannot read? Sounds like Mr. Cutter's imagination is in rude health. Pike's mouth twitched, as though another answer wished to live there and did not dare. If you see him, you'll send word? If I see a starving boy, I'll feed him. If I see a criminal, I'll let you know. He left with less certainty than he had arrived with. From the kitchen doorway, Eli had watched every word. He didn't believe you, he said after the hoofbeats faded. No, Mara said. He believed enough. That's a different thing. The rest of the day took on that tense, listening quality storms have before they break. Jasper set the men to work nearer the house. Mara sent the cook wagon girl, Tessa, into the cellar for sacks they did not need simply because she wanted one more pair of loyal eyes close. Eli slept for 40 minutes in the rocker by the stove and woke shaking, a cry trapped halfway up his throat. He would not say what dream had found him. Mara did not press. Instead, she took him to the South Corral and showed him how to come to Bishop, the sorrel gelding, from the shoulder instead of the face. When the horse finally let Eli lay a hand against his neck, wonder loosened the boy's whole frame. "How'd you know he'd let me?" he asked. "I didn't," Mara said. "Some creatures need to learn the world ain't made entirely of what kicked them." Toward dusk, Jasper came from the barn with word that Barlow Cutter himself had ridden out to the Keene place, likely leaning on the widow for some new signature. Mara's jaw tightened. If Cutter guessed where the paper had gone, he would not wait long. She needed another set of eyes who could not be bought. Judge Harlan Reed, the circuit rider due through Laramie Junction day after tomorrow, was the only man likely to hear the matter straight. That evening over stew, Jasper said what both of them had been circling. "Easy path is still open. Pike would take the boy. Cutter would take his paper. You might keep the ranch a while longer." Mara's spoon went still. Eli stopped eating. Jasper looked not at the child, but at her. "I'm not asking for my sake. I'm asking because once you choose, there'll be no choosing back." Mara let the quiet stretch. The lamp hissed softly. Wind pressed a cold hand against the window glass. "If you had been sitting at that table, with a hunted boy on one side and your husband's stolen name on the other, what would you have done? Saved the walls around you, or the life in front of you? Some choices don't ask what is safe. They ask who you are when safety is laid down and dares you to pick it up." At last Mara looked at Eli. "You staying here tonight?" He answered with the caution of a child who had learned promises could turn on him. "If you'll have me, then hear me plain. Nobody drags you off this ranch while I can stand upright." The spoon slipped from his hand and clinked against the bowl. He stared at her like the words had struck somewhere tender he no longer believed existed. Jasper leaned back and breathed once through his nose. "All right then," he said. "Good to know what tomorrow's trouble is called." Trouble came before midnight. Hound's bark broke once, twice, then cut short. Jasper was already up from his bunkhouse cot and crossing the yard when the first bottle hit the barn wall and burst into fire. Light ran orange across the corrals. Horses screamed. Men shouted from the dark. "Cellar," Mara snapped. Eli went white. "Now." He ran then, not because fear left him, but because he had finally learned one voice in the world that did not use urgency as cruelty. Jasper hauled the hatch up. Tessa slid in after the boy with blankets and the cash tin. Mara snatched the forged note, Caleb's ledger page, and the oilcloth packet from beneath the flour bin just as a second bottle shattered on the porch. Outside, Barlow Cutter's voice rose smooth as lamp oil. "Mrs. Bell, hand over my property, and I'll leave you a roof to sleep under." Mara stepped onto the porch with the shotgun braced hard against her shoulder. Flames licked the barn siding behind her. Cutter sat his horse beyond the well, coat collar turned up, Sheriff Vance at his right hand, and 3 ranch drifters at his left. "You forged my husband's name," she called. "You beat a woman for finding out. The roof can go to hell before the boy does." Cutter smiled thinly. "A widow's pride is expensive. Then send me the bill." He nodded once. One of the drifters swung a torch toward the hayrick. Mara fired. The torch flew from the man's hand and buried smoking in the mud. Horses crashed against their stalls. Jasper came out of the smoke with a wet horse blanket, beat flames off the porch rail, then fired his own rifle from the hip. One of Cutter's men yelped and ducked behind the trough. Everything went fast after that. Wood popped. Glass burst. Hound found his bark again and threw himself at a horse's hocks. Eli, hidden below, could hear boots overhead and the roar of fire taking dry hay. He clutched the blanket around Tessa's shoulders because she was crying though she kept swearing she was not. Then through the slats came one clear sound. Mara's voice, low and fierce. "Run the North Wash." Jasper dropped through the hatch blackened with soot, grabbed Eli by the arm, and shoved him toward the back tunnel where potatoes were once rolled cool under summer ground. They came up 50 yards from the house in the weed patch by the creek. Cold night hit Eli's face like water. Behind them, Mara backed off the porch with the shotgun empty and the oilcloth packet tucked inside her coat. Cutter saw it. He spurred forward. Eli did not think. He bolted from the weeds, flung himself between them, and threw the brass key as hard as he could toward the creek stones. Cutter wheeled at once. For half a second, every eye followed the flashing arc. That was all Mara needed. She swung the shotgun stock into Cutter's jaw. He went out of the saddle sideways, hit the mud, and came up spitting blood and astonishment. Sheriff Vance reached for his pistol just as Deputy Pike rode in from the road and shouted, "Stand off. Judge Reed's a mile behind me, and so is half the town." It was not bravery that stopped Vance first. It was numbers. Fire draws witnesses faster than church bells. Lanterns were already moving on the rise beyond the cottonwoods. Cutter looked from the burning barn to the gathering lights and understood too late that he had chosen the one kind of violence that could not stay private. By dawn, with the bell porch scorched black and the barn half saved by bucket lines, they rode into Laramie Junction under a sky the color of pewter. Mara's shoulder ached from recoil. Jasper smelled of smoke. Eli rode wrapped in Caleb's old coat, silent as winter, until they reached the hitch rail behind the meeting hall. There, with townsfolk filing in and Judge Reed shrugging off his gloves inside, Eli finally caught Mara's sleeve. "I never knocked," he said. She turned. His chin trembled once. He hated that it did. At places like Cutter's, if you knock, folks hear you and get to say no. Sleeping by the gate felt safer. Gates don't answer back. Mara looked at him a long moment. Then she crouched despite her bad knee and set both hands, plain and steady, on his narrow shoulders. "Listen to me, Eli. A shut gate kept you alive, but it wasn't what saved you. You walked through." He stared at her as if no one had ever given him credit for the hard part. She drew him into her arms before he could decide whether to allow it. For one stiff second, he stayed all bone and fright. Then he folded against her coat with a sound so small it hardly counted as breaking. If this part of the story has found you where the tender things still live, then you're exactly who stories like this are written for. A like and a subscribe is one quiet way of saying the world still has room for mercy. Judge Reed heard the matter before noon. Mara laid down the forged note. Eli told what he had seen. Pike, pale but steady, admitted under oath that Cutter had ordered him to fetch the boy and keep clear record of no injuries. Jasper testified to the fire. Then Widow Keene stood from the benches with one of Cutter's crooked account slips in her hand, and after her came Olson, Marbury, and two more men who had swallowed shame too long. Cutter tried smiling through it, tried bluster, tried calling Mara hysterical, Eli a thief, Pike a coward, but each word only stripped him plainer. When Reed held up Caleb Bell's false signature beside 3 real ones from county filings, even Sheriff Vance quit looking at Cutter and began looking for a place to put his own fear. The ruling came hard in public. All collections on Cutter's disputed notes were suspended. His office books were seized. Vance was removed pending inquiry. Cutter was charged with fraud, assault, attempted arson, and conspiracy before the whole room had finished breathing. He rose like he meant to storm out, and found half the men in town suddenly willing to block the doorway. Justice, when it finally came, did not shout. It closed. By late summer the Bell Ranch had a new barn wall, 2 more milk cows, and one boy who no longer slept outside. Eli learned letters at Tessa's table and colt gentling from Jasper, though Mara claimed the horse lessons were mostly for her own amusement. Sometimes he still paused at the porch as if asking permission from air alone. Then Mara would call from whatever room she was in, "Come in, son," and each time the word landed a little deeper, until one evening it no longer startled either of them. On the first cold night of autumn, Eli set a smooth white stone on the porch rail before coming inside for supper. Mara picked it up after, turned it warm in her palm, and understood at last what payment had meant to a child with nothing else to offer. Home, she thought, was the place where even your smallest thanks got noticed and none of your hungers had to sleep in the yard. Beyond the window the lamps shone gold across the grass, hounds snored by the stove, and the south gate stood open under the stars. Next time, we'll tell the story of the scar-faced postmaster's daughter who hid a wounded stranger in her father's livery barn, never guessing the man she saved had once ridden back from war with her name sewn into his coat.